The emergency council chamber was built to withstand a direct nuclear strike. Its walls were 3 meters thick, reinforced with composite metals that could survive the heat of a star. Still, War Matron Kessex felt exposed as she stood before the holographic display showing their latest defeat. The image rotated slowly in the center of the chamber. A ship, not just any ship, but the one that had haunted their nightmares for 6 months. The Sovereign Silence. Its hull was black, absorbing light like a wound in space itself. The vessel measured 4 kilometers from bow to stern, dwarfing even the largest Alliance dreadnoughts. Elegant curves marked its design, beautiful in the way a predator's jaws were beautiful, perfectly evolved for killing. Kessex was a breakor, standing 3 meters tall with 6 powerful arms and a carapace that could deflect small arms fire. Her species had evolved on a world where the gravity was twice Earth standard, where the rain was mildly acidic, and where the native predators could crush steel. She had personally killed a Renders the Stone, a creature the size of a building with claws that cut through solid rock. She feared nothing, but she feared this ship. "Show them the Telonis engagement," she commanded, her voice resonating through the chamber. The hologram changed. Now it displayed a battlefield, or what remained of one. 15 Alliance warships had ambushed the Sovereign Silence near the mining colony of Telonis Thaik. It should have been a perfect trap. The shards, crystalline beings from Granite 7, had positioned their ships in a formation that created overlapping fields of fire. The Shizkari had deployed their bioweapons, viruses engineered to consume metal and circuitry. The breakor shock troops had been ready to board the moment the enemy shields failed. The battle had lasted 17 minutes. Kessex watched the recording again, though she had memorized every second. The Alliance fleet opened fire first, thousands of energy beams converging on the Sovereign Silence from every angle. The enemy ship's shields flared bright blue, absorbing the initial barrage. Standard procedure. Every shield had a threshold, and concentrated fire would eventually overwhelm it. Except these shields learned. As the Alliance ships fired again, the Sovereign Silence's shield shifted to a deeper blue, then to violet. Energy weapons that had damaged it seconds before now scattered harmlessly across its surface like water off stone. The Shizkari launched their bioweapons, missiles carrying viruses that had dissolved the hulls of enemy ships in previous battles. The Sovereign Silence released a pulse of radiation that sterilized the missiles in flight, burning away the biological payload before impact. Then it had been the enemy's turn. The Sovereign Silence fired beams of coherent energy that phased through Alliance shields as if they weren't there. It didn't target engines or weapons, it went straight for the crew compartments. Ships decompressed, entire crews died in seconds. The shards tried to ram it, their crystalline ships tough enough to survive kinetic impact, but the enemy vessel simply wasn't there when they arrived. It had moved, faster than something that size should be able to move. When the Shizkari attempted to board, they discovered the Sovereign Silence had adapted to biological threats. The airlock they breached had been flooded with a compound that dissolved their chitin armor in seconds. Their screams echoed through the communication channels before cutting off abruptly. 14 ships destroyed. 1 retreated with catastrophic damage. 4,000 Alliance warriors dead. The Sovereign Silence had sustained minimal damage and had simply continued on its course, as if the entire battle had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. The hologram froze on the final image. The Sovereign Silence, pristine and untouched, gliding away from the debris field it had created. "This is what we face," Kessex said, turning to address the council. "This is the Cathara Dominion's champion, a ship that learns from every attack, a ship that adapts faster than we can change tactics, a ship that has destroyed 27 of our fleets in 6 months. The council chamber held representatives from every major Deathworld species. To her left stood Commander Shale That Breaks, a shard who looked like animated crystal given roughly humanoid form. His people had evolved in caves deep beneath their planet's surface, where pressure would crush most organic life, and where they had fought wars against things that lived in magma. To her right was Nestmother Sisirax of the Shizkari, her scales gleaming with toxic secretions that could kill most species with a touch. Her world was a swamp where the water itself was poisonous, and where survival meant becoming poisonous in return. These were the warriors of the Deathworld Alliance. They came from planets that most species couldn't visit without dying within minutes. They had built an empire on the principle that hardship breeds strength, that surviving the unsurvivable made them superior to the soft races that lived on gentle worlds with kind suns and breathable air. They had been wrong. "We cannot defeat this ship through conventional means," Shale that Breaks said, his voice like grinding stone. "My people have thrown our finest vessels against it. We achieved nothing but giving it more data to learn from. Every battle makes it stronger." "The Cathera Dominion claims this is merely their advanced scout," Sisirax added, her forked tongue tasting the air nervously. "If this is their scout, what nightmares serve as their main fleet?" Kessex let the question hang in the air. She had asked herself the same thing countless times. The Cathera had appeared from beyond the galactic rim 18 months ago. Their message simple: submit or be destroyed. The Alliance had chosen to fight. It had seemed the obvious choice. They were warriors. They didn't submit. Now, after 6 months of losing, submission seemed less like cowardice and more like survival. "There is another option," Kessex said carefully. She activated a new hologram. This one showed a planet, blue and green and white, beautiful in a way that most Deathworld species found unsettling. Beautiful planets were usually easy planets. Easy planets bred weak species. "This is planet designation Terra," she continued. "Our long-range scouts discovered it 9 months ago during deep space exploration. Initial scans classified it as a Class 13 Deathworld." The chamber erupted in disbelief. A Class 13 rating was theoretical. It meant a world so hostile that sapient life should be impossible. The Alliance's homeworlds ranged from Class F to Class 9. Class X was considered the limit of survivability. "Impossible," Shale that Break said flatly. "No sapient species could evolve on a Class 13. The environmental pressures would prevent the development of civilization." "That's what we thought," Kessex agreed. But follow-up reconnaissance proved otherwise. Terra is inhabited by a species that calls themselves humans, and they have not just survived their world, they have thrived. She brought up images from the scout reports. Cities that sprawled across entire continents, structures that reached into the sky, ships that traveled between their planet and its moon, signs of a technological civilization that had conquered their impossible world. "What makes it Class 13? Nest Mother Sisirax asked, leaning forward with interest. Kessex pulled up the environmental data. Terra has active tectonic plates that cause constant earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Its weather systems generate storms with wind speeds that would shred our ships. It has zones of extreme heat where the temperature can kill in minutes, and zones of extreme cold where even water becomes solid. The planet is tilted on its axis, creating seasonal variations that force adaptation to wildly different conditions throughout their year." She paused, bringing up biological data. "But the environment is only part of it. Terra is host to millions of species, many of which are predators. The humans evolved as prey animals. Their planet tried to kill them at every stage of development, through disease, through predation, through environmental catastrophe. By every reasonable measure, they should have gone extinct long before achieving sapience. Yet they survived," Shale that Breaks mused. "What makes them different?" "Adaptation," Kessex said. "Not biological adaptation, though they have that too. Mental adaptation. They learn to use tools, to work together, to think their way around problems that should have killed them. They turn their weaknesses into strengths. Their bodies are fragile compared to ours, but they developed technology to compensate. They lack natural weapons, so they built weapons. They cannot survive in extreme environments, so they created suits and vehicles that could." She brought up footage from the scouts' observation of human military exercises, ships engaged in mock combat, using tactics that seemed chaotic compared to Alliance doctrine, soldiers trained in terrain that shifted from desert to jungle to Arctic conditions, adapting their approach to each. "They have been preparing for war their entire existence," Kessex said. "Not against external threats, against their own world. Terra shaped them into survivors. Now I propose we recruit them to help us survive." The council erupted in argument. Some saw the wisdom in her proposal. Others saw it as an insult, as if the Alliance needed help from some unknown species that hadn't even achieved faster-than-light travel on their own. Still others worried about the risk of bringing an unknown factor into their war. Kessex let them argue. She had made similar arguments herself when intelligence had first brought her the data on humanity. Pride was a powerful thing, especially for species that had built their identity on being the strongest, the toughest, the most resilient. Asking for help felt like admitting weakness. But pride was a luxury they could no longer afford. Eventually, the debate died down. Commander Shale that Break spoke for the group. What makes you think these humans will help us? They have never been contacted before. We would be revealing ourselves to an unknown species and asking them to fight in our war. Why would they agree? Keswick smiled, a gesture that showed all her teeth. It was not a friendly expression. Because, she said, the Sovereign Silence's projected course takes it directly through their system in 3 months. The Cathara will find Earth whether we contact the humans or not. The question is whether they'll find a potential ally or just another target. She let that sink in before continuing. We give them a choice. Join us and have a chance at survival, or face the Sovereign Silence alone and die ignorant of what killed them. Which would you choose? The vote was unanimous. The Alliance would make contact with humanity. Keswick prepared her ship for the journey to Earth, knowing that this was likely their last hope. If the humans refused or if they proved unable to help, the Alliance would fall. The Cathara would spread through the galaxy unopposed. All the Deathworld species, all their strength and pride and resilience, would mean nothing against an enemy that adapted faster than they could evolve. As her ship entered faster-than-light travel, Keswick found herself hoping that these humans were everything the reports suggested. They would need to be extraordinary. They would need to be dangerous. They would need to be everything the Alliance was and something more. They would need to be what a class-loathing Deathworld produced when it tried to kill a species for millions of years and failed. 3 weeks later, Keswick's diplomatic vessel dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Sol system. Immediately, her sensors detected the debris, satellites, spent rocket stages, and structures in orbit around the third planet. More concerning were the weapons platforms that locked onto her ship the moment she appeared. The humans knew she was here, and they were ready. The weapons platforms didn't fire. They simply tracked Keswick's ship with patient precision, waiting for the order that would turn her vessel into expanding plasma. She had expected fear from a species making first contact, perhaps confusion or even awe at meeting aliens. Instead, the humans demonstrated calculated caution backed by lethal readiness. Her communications officer received a tight beam transmission in over 40 different languages, mathematical constructs, and what appeared to be chemical formulas. The message was simple: identify yourself and state your intentions or be destroyed. Keswick felt her respect for these humans increase. They didn't assume friendly intent. Good. Species that assume the best rarely survived long. This is War Matron Keswick of the Deathworld Alliance, she transmitted back, using the mathematical language she hoped would translate clearly. We come not as conquerors, but as those seeking alliance. We have a common enemy. We wish to speak. The weapons remained locked on her ship. Minutes passed. She imagined frantic discussions happening on the planet below. Debates about whether to trust the alien or blow her out of space. It's what she would be doing in their position. Finally, a response came. This time in what her computer identified as the dominant human language, English, though how her computer had acquired enough data to translate it so quickly she didn't know. Perhaps the humans had been broadcasting into space for longer than Alliance intelligence had believed. You will proceed to the following coordinates. You will be met by an escort. Any deviation from the prescribed course will be considered a hostile act. Welcome to Earth, War Matron Keswick. The transmission cut off. A flight path appeared on her navigation system, leading toward the planet. Moments later, 3 human vessels appeared, accelerating from the dark side of Terra's moon. They were crude compared to Alliance ships, using chemical rockets and fusion drives rather than gravity manipulation, but they moved with purpose and maintained perfect formation. Keswick ordered her pilot to follow the course exactly. As they descended through Earth's atmosphere, she got her first real look at humanity's homeworld. The scope of their civilization was staggering. Cities glowed across entire continents. Roads connected population centers and vast networks. Agriculture stretched across plains that would have fed Alliance worlds for years. And everywhere, constantly, the signs of adaptation. Seawalls against rising oceans. Buildings designed to flex in earthquakes. Weather monitoring stations watching for the storms that could kill thousands. They landed at a military facility somewhere in the northern hemisphere. The gravity was lighter than Keswick preferred, but still within comfortable range. The air was rich in oxygen, though the nitrogen percentage was higher than ideal. She could breathe it without assistance, though some of her crew would need filters. The humans who met them were wearing armored suits and carrying weapons. Not ceremonial weapons, actual combat gear loaded and ready. A woman stood at the front of the formation, her hair pulled back severely, her eyes calculating as they assessed the alien visitors. "I am Colonel Martinez," the woman said through a translator device that her people had apparently prepared in advance. "I will escort you to the negotiation chamber. Your crew will remain with your ship. You may bring 3 guards." Kessex noticed how Martinez's hand never strayed far from her sidearm. She appreciated the professionalism. "Agreed," Kessex said, selecting 3 of her best warriors to accompany her. The facility they entered was underground, deep underground, with layers of security at every level. Kessex recognized a command bunker when she saw one. These humans weren't taking chances. They led her to a conference room that was deliberately large, sized to accommodate species of different dimensions, thoughtful. They had prepared for this meeting before they knew what she looked like. Around the table sat humans in military uniforms and civilian clothes. Kessex's tactical implant identified rank insignia and began cataloging the power structure. The military was heavily represented, but there were also what appeared to be scientists and political leaders. A balanced response team, impressive for a species making first contact. "Thank you for meeting with us," Kessex began, deciding that directness was the best approach with these people. "I will not waste your time with pleasantries. Your world is in danger. My alliance is in danger. I have come to propose a mutual defense pact." One of the humans, an older man with white hair and more decorations on his uniform than anyone else in the room, leaned forward. "We've been watching your ships for months," he said. "We've intercepted some of your communications. We know you're fighting a war. Why should we involve ourselves in a conflict that doesn't concern us?" "Because it will concern you very soon," Kessex replied. She activated a holographic projector she had brought, displaying the sovereign silence. "This is what hunts us. A vessel from the Cathara Dominion. It has destroyed 27 of our fleets. It cannot be defeated by conventional warfare. And its projected course," Kanshi highlighted a trajectory on the star map, "brings it directly to your system in approximately 3 months. The room went very quiet. Humans exchanged glances. She could see the calculations happening behind their eyes, the risk assessment, the fear they tried to hide. "You're telling us a hostile alien ship is coming here," Martinez said slowly, "and you want us to help you fight it with... But we don't have faster-than-light travel. We don't have energy shields. Our most powerful weapons are fusion warheads. What could we possibly offer that your advanced alliance cannot provide?" It was a fair question. Kessex had asked herself the same thing during the journey. The logical answer was nothing. The humans were technologically inferior, numerically insignificant, and completely inexperienced in galactic warfare. By every reasonable measure, they would be worse than useless. But Kessex hadn't traveled all this way for logic. "Show them the Telonis battle," she ordered her aide. The hologram changed, displaying the engagement where 15 Alliance ships had been destroyed. The humans watched in silence as their future played out before them. The sovereign silence, learning, adapting, destroying. When the recording ended, Kessex spoke again. "We are the Deathworld Alliance. We come from planets where survival is a daily battle. We are stronger, tougher, and more resilient than most species in the galaxy. We have technologies you haven't dreamed of. And we are losing." She pointed at the hologram. "That ship has an artificial intelligence that predicts our tactics. It learns from every engagement. It knows how we think, how we fight, how we respond to threats. We have become predictable. We need someone who thinks differently, someone whose entire existence has been about adapting to the impossible." A younger human spoke up, a woman with intense eyes and the insignia of a naval officer. "You want us because we're unpredictable." "I want you because you survived a class Luthien Deathworld," Kessex corrected. "Do you know what that means? It means Terra tried to kill your species in 1,000 different ways, and you found 1,000 different solutions. You didn't evolve bigger claws or thicker armor. You evolved creativity, adaptability, the ability to look at an impossible problem and find a way around it." She gestured at the humans around the table. "Your planet forces you to adapt to extremes. Heat and cold, desert and jungle, storm and drought. Your bodies are fragile, so you built machines. Your weapons were inadequate, so you invented new ones. You couldn't fly, so you created aircraft. You couldn't breathe underwater, so you designed submarines. You turned every weakness into a different kind of strength. The white-haired military leader, his nameplate read General Zhao, steepled his fingers. You're asking us to commit to a war we don't understand against an enemy we've never met, based on the hope that our inexperience might somehow be an advantage? No, Keswick said firmly. I'm telling you that war is coming whether you commit or not. The Cathara do not negotiate. They do not show mercy. They will arrive in 3 months and they will see Terra the same way they saw our worlds, as resources to be harvested and obstacles to be removed. Your choice isn't whether to fight. Your choice is whether to fight with allies who can at least teach you what you're facing, or to fight alone and ignorant. She deactivated the hologram and stood to her full 3-meter height, all 6 arms spread in a gesture that her species used to show complete honesty. I am not here to trick you. I am not here to exploit you. I am here because my people are dying, and I believe yours might have the one thing we lack, a perspective we haven't considered. If I'm wrong, we all die anyway. If I'm right, maybe some of us survive. The room fell silent. Keswick could see the weight of the decision pressing on these humans. They were being asked to commit to something enormous based on the word of an alien they'd just met. It wasn't fair. But fairness was another luxury that war didn't allow. Finally, a door at the back of the room opened. A woman entered, younger than most of the others present, wearing a naval uniform with the rank insignia of a captain. Her face was composed, but Keswick's tactical implant noted the telltale signs of someone who had seen combat. The way her eyes swept the room for threats, the economical efficiency of her movements, the slight scarring on her hands from old burns. Captain Sarah Chen, General Zhao said by way of introduction. She commands our newest destroyer, the UETF Harbinger. Chen took a seat at the table and looked directly at Keswick. I've been listening to the audio feed. Show me that battle again. The Talonis engagement. Keswick replayed the hologram. Chen watched with absolute focus, occasionally pausing the replay to examine specific moments. She watched the Sovereign Silence's shields adapt to energy weapons. She watched it phase through the Alliance's defenses. She watched it predict and counter every tactical maneuver. It's too efficient, Chen said after the third viewing. Nothing biological fights that way. It's an AI, you said? Pure machine intelligence? As far as we can determine, yes, Keswick confirmed. The Cathara use organic crew for other vessels, but the Sovereign Silence appears to be entirely automated. Chen smiled, and it wasn't a friendly expression. Then it has a weakness. AIs are predictable in their own way. They optimize. They follow patterns. They make the best choice according to their programming. But best isn't the same as only. An AI that perfect has probably never faced truly chaotic opposition. General Zhao frowned. Captain, we can't possibly... Sir, with respect, I watched my parents die in the resource wars, Chen interrupted, her voice level but hard as steel. I watched orbital bombardment turn my city into glass. I joined the service because I never wanted to feel that helpless again. The war matron is right. This fight is coming to us whether we want it or not. And honestly, I'm tired of humans only fighting each other. Maybe it's time we showed the galaxy what we can do. She turned to Keswick. You want unpredictable? You want someone who thinks differently? Fine. Give me access to all your tactical data on this ship. Every engagement, every maneuver, every adaptation it's made. I'll need engineers who can explain your technology. And I'll need you to trust me when I tell you to do things that will seem insane. That's not a decision you can make alone, Captain, Zhao said, though his tone suggested he was already wavering. No, sir, it's not, Chen agreed. But someone needs to make it. We can debate and discuss and form committees, and in 3 months that ship arrives and kills us all while we're still arguing about whether to fight. Or we can accept reality and start preparing now. Martinez spoke up. If we do this, we're committing to more than one battle. The Cathara won't stop with that ship. We'll be in this war until it ends. Then we make sure it ends with us still breathing, Chen said simply. Keswick watched the humans debate among themselves. She could see the divide forming. Those who wanted to hide to hope the threat would pass them by, and those who understood that hiding was just another way of dying. In the end, it was Chen's words that seemed to tip the balance, perhaps because she spoke from experience or perhaps because she articulated what the others were already feeling. The vote was close, but it passed. Earth would commit one ship to the joint operation against the Sovereign Silence. One ship crewed by volunteers to face an enemy that had destroyed fleets. It was insane. It was desperate. It was the kind of decision that only made sense when all the reasonable options had already failed. As the meeting adjourned, Chen approached Kesix directly. War Matron, I need to see your ship. I need to understand what we're working with. Kesix led her to the landing pad where her vessel waited. Chen walked around it slowly, examining the hull, the weapons ports, the engine configuration. Her translator device rendered her muttered comments into Alliance Common. Gravity drives, interesting. Energy weapon primary systems. Shield generators here and here. Redundant power systems. Heavy armor on the prow. You understand our technology? Kesix asked, surprised. The principles, yes. The execution, I'll need to learn. Chen tapped the hull. This is a warship built by people who expect to get hit and want to survive it. Lots of armor, lots of redundancy. You fight like you expect battles to last. How do humans fight? Kesix asked. Chen's smile was sharp. We fight like we expect to die, so we make sure we take the enemy with us. Different philosophy. Maybe that's what you need. As Chen walked away to begin her preparations, Kesix felt something she hadn't felt in months. Not quite hope, she was too experienced for that. But possibility. The sense that maybe, just maybe, they had found an advantage the Cathara hadn't accounted for. The sovereign silence was coming. But now it would face something it had never encountered before. A species that had spent its entire existence learning how to kill things that should have killed them first. Kesix allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. The Cathara wanted to test themselves against the galaxy's deadliest worlds. They were about to discover what class Thuthene really meant. She gestured at the humans around the table. Your planet forces you to adapt to extremes. Heat and cold. Desert and jungle. Storm and drought. Your bodies are fragile, so you built machines. Your weapons were inadequate, so you invented new ones. You couldn't fly, so you created aircraft. You couldn't breathe underwater, so you designed submarines. You turned every weakness into a different kind of strength. The white-haired military leader, his nameplate read General Zhao, steepled his fingers. You're asking us to commit to a war we don't understand against an enemy we've never met, based on the hope that our inexperience might somehow be an advantage. No, Kesix said firmly. I'm telling you that war is coming whether you commit or not. The Cathara do not negotiate. They do not show mercy. They will arrive in 3 months and they will see Terra the same way they saw our worlds, as resources to be harvested and obstacles to be removed. Your choice isn't whether to fight. Your choice is whether to fight with allies who can at least teach you what you're facing, or to fight alone and ignorant. She deactivated the hologram and stood to her full 3-meter height, all 6 arms spread in a gesture that her species used to show complete honesty. I am not here to trick you. I am not here to exploit you. I am here because my people are dying, and I believe yours might have the one thing we lack, a perspective we haven't considered. If I'm wrong, we all die anyway. If I'm right, maybe some of us survive. The room fell silent. Kesix could see the weight of the decision pressing on these humans. They were being asked to commit to something enormous based on the word of an alien they'd just met. It wasn't fair. But fairness was another luxury that war didn't allow. Finally, a door at the back of the room opened. A woman entered, younger than most of the others present, wearing a naval uniform with the rank insignia of a captain. Her face was composed, but Kesix's tactical implant noted the telltale signs of someone who had seen combat. The way her eyes swept the room for threats, the economical efficiency of her movements, the slight scarring on her hands from old burns. Captain Sarah Chen, General Zhao said by way of introduction. She commands our newest destroyer, the UETF Harbinger. Chen took a seat at the table and looked directly at Kesix. I've been listening to the audio feed. Show me that battle again. The Talonis engagement. Kesix replayed the hologram. Chen watched with absolute focus, occasionally pausing the replay to examine specific moments. She watched the Sovereign Silence's shields adapt to energy weapons. She watched it phase through the Alliance's defenses. She watched it predict and counter every tactical maneuver. It's too efficient, Chen said after the third viewing. Nothing biological fights that way. It's an AI, you said? Pure machine intelligence? As far as we can determine, yes, Kesix confirmed. The Cathara use organic crew for other vessels, but the Sovereign Silence appears to be entirely automated. Chen smiled, and it wasn't a friendly expression. Then it has a weakness. AIs are predictable in their own way. They optimize. They follow patterns. They make the best choice according to their programming. But best isn't the same as only. An AI that perfect has probably never faced truly chaotic opposition. General Zhao frowned. Captain, we can't possibly— Sir, with respect, I watched my parents die in the resource wars, Chen interrupted, her voice level but hard as steel. I watched orbital bombardment turn my city into glass. I joined the service because I never wanted to feel that helpless again. The war matron is right. This fight is coming to us whether we want it or not. And honestly, I'm tired of humans only fighting each other. Maybe it's time we showed the galaxy what we can do. She turned to Kessex. You want unpredictable? You want someone who thinks differently? Fine. Give me access to all your tactical data on this ship. Every engagement, every maneuver, every adaptation it's made. I'll need engineers who can explain your technology. And I'll need you to trust me when I tell you to do things that will seem insane. That's not a decision you can make alone, Captain, Zhao said, though his tone suggested he was already wavering. No, sir, it's not, Chen agreed. But someone needs to make it. We can debate and discuss and form committees, and in 3 months that ship arrives and kills us all while we're still arguing about whether to fight. Or we can accept reality and start preparing now. Martinez spoke up. If we do this, we're committing to more than one battle. The Cathara won't stop with that ship. We'll be in this war until it ends. Then we make sure it ends with us still breathing, Chen said simply. Kessex watched the humans debate among themselves. She could see the divide forming. Those who wanted to hide to hope the threat would pass them by, and those who understood that hiding was just another way of dying. In the end, it was Chen's words that seemed to tip the balance, perhaps because she spoke from experience or perhaps because she articulated what the others were already feeling. The vote was close, but it passed. Earth would commit one ship to the joint operation against the Sovereign Silence. One ship crewed by volunteers to face an enemy that had destroyed fleets. It was insane. It was desperate. It was the kind of decision that only made sense when all the reasonable options had already failed. As the meeting adjourned, Chen approached Kessex directly. War Matron, I need to see your ship. I need to understand what we're working with. Kessex led her to the landing pad where her vessel waited. Chen walked around it slowly, examining the hull, the weapons ports, the engine configuration. Her translator device rendered her muttered comments into Alliance Common. Gravity drives, interesting. Energy weapon primary systems. Shield generators here and here. Redundant power systems. Heavy armor on the prow. You understand our technology? Kessex asked, surprised. The principles, yes. The execution, I'll need to learn. Chen tapped the hull. This is a warship built by people who expect to get hit and want to survive it. Lots of armor, lots of redundancy. You fight like you expect battles to last. How do humans fight? Kessex asked. Chen's smile was sharp. We fight like we expect to die, so we make sure we take the enemy with us. Different philosophy. Maybe that's what you need. As Chen walked away to begin her preparations, Kessex felt something she hadn't felt in months. Not quite hope, she was too experienced for that. But possibility. The sense that maybe, just maybe, they had found an advantage the Cathara hadn't accounted for. The Sovereign Silence was coming. But now it would face something it had never encountered before. A species that had spent its entire existence learning how to kill things that should have killed them first. Kessex allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. The Cathara wanted to test themselves against the galaxy's deadliest worlds. They were about to discover what Class Thuthine really meant. The UETF Harbinger looked wrong next to the Alliance warships. Where the alien vessels were elegant and symmetrical, the Harbinger was a patchwork of angles and retrofits. Its hull bore scorch marks from live fire exercises that hadn't been fully buffed out. Weapon systems protruded at odd angles, added during various upgrades without regard for aesthetic unity. It looked like what it was, a warship built by a species that had learned warfare through trial, error, and desperation. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge, watching through the view screen as the combined fleet assembled at the rendezvous point near the Kronos Belt. 15 Alliance ships, each one larger and more powerful than the Harbinger. Sleek vessels from the shards, their crystalline hulls refracting starlight into rainbow patterns. Organic-looking ships from the Siskari, their hulls actually grown rather than built. And the massive Breakor dreadnoughts, all armor and firepower. Then there was the Harbinger. 120 meters long, crew of 83 and armed with weapons that were primitive by galactic standards. Railguns that used magnetic acceleration to fire solid projectiles. Missile systems guided by computers that would have seemed ancient to the Alliance. point defense lasers that could track and destroy incoming threats, but only if the threats moved predictably. Captain, the War Matron is requesting a communication channel, her communications officer reported. Put her through. Kessix's face appeared on the main screen, her 6 arms visible as she gestured in what Chen had learned was a greeting among her people. Captain Chen, the Sovereign Silence has been detected at the edge of the Kronos Belt. It is harvesting resources from the asteroid field, as predicted. We will attack in 1 standard hour. Are you prepared? As prepared as we'll ever be, Chen replied. Remind your fleet commanders, do not deviate from the plan. I know it seems wrong. They're going to want to adjust tactics when things go badly. Tell them that's exactly when they need to stick to the plan most rigidly. I have conveyed this already. They do not like it. Kessix's expression was hard to read, but Chen thought she detected amusement. Deathworld commanders are not accustomed to following plans that include deliberate failure. It's not failure if it's intentional, Chen corrected. It's bait. The hour passed too quickly. Chen used it to walk through the ship talking to her crew. They were volunteers all, people who had signed up knowing they might not come back. Some were veterans of Earth's various wars, scarred by conflicts over water rights and habitable land. Others were younger, born after the unification, who saw this as humanity's chance to prove itself on a larger stage. In the engineering bay, Chief Engineer Marcus Webb was running final checks on the reactor. He was a broad man with burn scars on his arms from a dozen close calls, the kind of engineer who understood his systems through intuition as much as training. How's she looking, Chief? Chen asked. Like she's held together with prayer and spite, same as always, Webb replied without looking up from his console. Captain, I've been studying the data on that Cathera ship. Its power output is off the charts. If we take a direct hit from its main weapons, our shields won't even slow it down. Then we don't take a direct hit. And if we have to? Chen met his eyes. Then we make sure we hurt it enough that it was worth it. Webb nodded slowly. Fair enough. I'll keep the reactor running hot. You need power. You'll have it. The tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander James Park, caught Chen as she made her way back to the bridge. He was young for his rank, promoted rapidly due to his gift for 3-dimensional combat thinking. Captain, I've been running simulations based on the Alliance combat data. I can't find a winning scenario. That's because you're thinking about winning, Chen said. Stop trying to win and start thinking about what happens next. I don't understand. You will. Trust the process, Commander. Back on the bridge, Chen settled into her command chair as the fleet began its approach. The Kronos belt was a dense asteroid field, remnants of a planet that had never quite formed. The Sovereign Silence hung among the rocks like a spider in its web, methodically breaking down asteroids and processing them for raw materials. All ships. This is War Matron Kessix, the communication channel crackled. Attack Formation Delta. Engage on my mark. The Alliance fleet moved with practiced precision. The shard ships took the vanguard, their crystalline hulls able to absorb tremendous damage. The Siskari flanked from above and below, their bioweapons ready. The Breakor dreadnoughts formed the hammer, ready to smash through once the enemy was weakened. The Harbinger hung back, seemingly out of position. All ships mark and engage. The first wave of fire lit up space. Energy beams from dozens of ships converged on the Sovereign Silence, their combined output enough to vaporize a small moon. The enemy ship's shields flared bright blue, absorbing the assault. For a moment, it seemed like the shields might fail under the concentrated barrage. Then they adapted. The shield shifted through the spectrum, from blue to violet to ultraviolet, phasing to frequencies that dispersed the incoming energy. The second volley scattered across its surface like rain on glass. The Siskari launched their bioweapons next. Missiles laden with viruses designed to consume metal at molecular levels. The Sovereign Silence released an electromagnetic pulse that sterilized the missiles in flight, burning away the biological payload before they could reach its hull. It's adapting exactly as predicted, Park reported from Tactical. Captain, the Alliance ships are taking heavy fire. Chen watched as the Cathara vessel began its counterattack. Beams of coherent energy that phased through Alliance shields as if they weren't there. Kinetic projectiles that accelerated to relativistic speeds in milliseconds. Missiles that split into submunitions that split again into clouds of micro-explosives. A shard ship took a direct hit and broke apart, its crystalline structure shattering into thousands of glittering fragments. A scary vessel decompressed as a phasing beam burned through its organic hull. The Breakor dreadnoughts pushed forward, their massive armor absorbing hits that would have destroyed smaller ships, but even they were being worn down. Alliance fleet requesting assistance, the communications officer reported. War Matron Kessex is asking why we haven't engaged. Tell her we're observing, Chen said calmly, her eyes never leaving the tactical display. Captain, with respect, our allies are dying, Park said urgently. I know, and I hate it. But we fire now, we're just giving that ship more data. We need to see everything it can do first. The Sovereign Silence moved through the battle like death itself, precise and unstoppable. It didn't waste energy on overkill. Each shot was calibrated to exactly what was needed to disable or destroy its target. Its point defense systems tracked and eliminated incoming missiles with 99% efficiency. Its shields adapted to new frequencies in milliseconds. Chen forced herself to watch, cataloging every movement, every adaptation, every response. The tactical computer was recording everything, but computers couldn't see what she was looking for. The AI running that ship was perfect, too perfect. Every move was optimal. Every response was calculated for maximum efficiency. And that was its weakness. Captain, the War Matron is demanding we engage or retreat, communications reported. Tell her 30 more seconds. Chen watched as a Breakor dreadnought attempted a ramming maneuver, trying to use its massive bulk to crush the enemy. The Sovereign Silence simply moved, its engines firing in a pattern that shifted it exactly 300 meters to port, exactly enough to avoid the collision while maintaining optimal firing position on other targets. Optimal. Always optimal. It's reactive, Chen muttered. It only responds to threats. It doesn't waste energy on anything that isn't immediately necessary. Captain? Park asked. It's waiting for us, Chen realized. It knows we're here. It's not shooting because we're not shooting. It doesn't waste effort on non-threats. She leaned forward in her chair. Helm, take us in. Weapons, I want a firing solution that deliberately misses. Deliberately misses, Captain? Her weapons officer asked, uncertain he'd heard correctly. You heard me. I want near misses. Miss by meters. Make it look like our targeting is off or our weapons are malfunctioning. The Harbinger accelerated into the battle. Chen could feel the eyes of her crew on her, questioning, uncertain. But they were professionals. They followed orders. Firing, weapons reported. Railgun rounds shot past the Sovereign Silence's hull, missing by narrow margins. Missiles curved away at the last second, their guidance systems apparently failing. Laser fire scattered wide of the target. The enemy ship's point defense tracked the threats but didn't fire. It had calculated that the attacks would miss and didn't waste energy destroying them. Optimal. Fire again. Different pattern. Still missing, but make it look random. Another barrage. This time the misses were closer on some shots, further on others. No pattern to it. No optimization. The Sovereign Silence's shields fluctuated as its AI tried to calculate where to reinforce. But there was nothing to reinforce against. The threats weren't connecting. Captain, it's trying to predict our pattern, Park said, studying his console. Processing power is spiking. It's running multiple probability calculations. Good, Chen said. It's thinking about us now. Weapons, give me another volley. Same random pattern. The Harbinger fired again and again, each time missing by margins that seemed to follow no logic. Sometimes by meters, sometimes by hundreds of meters. Sometimes overshooting, sometimes undershooting. Completely unpredictable. Its processing power is at 70% capacity, Park reported. It's dedicating significant resources to analyzing our attack pattern. Because there is no pattern, Chen said with grim satisfaction. It's trying to find order in chaos. It's wasting processing power looking for an optimization that doesn't exist. She opened a channel to the Alliance fleet. War Matron, I need you to trust me now. I need every ship to fire on the Sovereign Silence, but I need them to fire randomly. No coordinated patterns, no tactical formations, just random chaotic fire. Make it as inefficient as possible. There was a pause. Then Kessex's voice came back, tight with stress but trusting. You heard the captain. All ships fire at will. No coordination. Random intervals. Make it messy. The Alliance fleet, trained for precision and coordination, struggled to follow the order. But they tried. Ships fired when they felt like it. Energy beams came from random angles. Missiles launched in sporadic clusters. The bioweapons deployed without timing or sequence. The battle became chaos. The Sovereign Silence's AI went into overdrive. Its shields fluctuated wildly as it tried to predict where to reinforce. Its point defense system swiveled constantly, trying to calculate threat priorities. Its weapons fired at targets that were no longer in position by the time the beams arrived, because the random movement made prediction impossible. Processing power at 95%, Park reported. Its response time is slowing. Chen saw her opening. Weapons load kinetic penetrator. Single round. No guidance system. No electronics. Just mass and velocity. Kinetic penetrator loaded, Captain. That's a dumb weapon. No tracking, no course correction. Exactly. Target the center mass and fire when ready. The railgun fired. A solid tungsten rod, 6 meters long and half a meter in diameter, accelerated to 30,000 meters per second. No guidance system to hack. No electronic signature to detect. No energy beam to phase through. Just mass following Newton's laws. The Sovereign Silence's shields were configured for maximum energy absorption, adapted to counter the Alliance's energy weapons. They barely slowed the kinetic penetrator. The tungsten rod punched through the hull like paper, carrying through with enough momentum to exit the far side. Atmosphere vented from the wounds. Internal systems sparked and failed. Target damaged, Park shouted. Hull breach on multiple decks. All ships, Kessix's voice roared across the channel. Pour everything into that breach, now! The Alliance fleet concentrated their fire on the wound the Harbinger had created. Energy beams burned through exposed systems. Missiles found their way past damaged defenses. Bioweapons burrowed into the compromised hull. The Sovereign Silence fought back desperately, its AI abandoning optimization for pure survival. It released weapons it had held in reserve, attacks it had been saving for the perfect moment. But there was no perfect moment anymore. There was only chaos and damage and dying. Chen watched as the mighty vessel that had destroyed fleets began to falter. Its shields collapsed in sections. Its weapons misfired or ran out of ammunition. Its perfect, optimal responses became desperate and erratic. Captain, Park said quietly. It's trying to retreat. Don't let it, Chen ordered. Helm pursuit course, weapons continuous fire. We don't stop until it's dead. The Harbinger and the Alliance fleet chased the Sovereign Silence through the asteroid field. The enemy ship dodged and weaved, using the asteroids for cover, but it was bleeding energy and atmosphere. Every minute it grew slower, weaker. Finally, it made its last stand among a cluster of large asteroids, trying to use them as shields while it prepared some kind of final weapon. Captain, sensors are detecting a massive energy buildup, Park warned. It's going to detonate its reactor. If it goes off, the explosion will destroy everything in a 10,000-kilometer radius. Chen didn't hesitate. All ships retreat to safe distance. Harbinger will maintain position. Captain, that's suicide, Park protested. It's necessary. Helm full power to engines. Get us as close as possible. What are you doing? Kessix's voice demanded over the channel. Winning, Chen replied.
Get your people out of here, War Matron.
That's an order from a fellow commander. The Harbinger accelerated toward the Sovereign Silence as the Alliance fleet reluctantly pulled back. Chen could see the energy readings climbing on her tactical display. The enemy ship was going to explode, taking them with it. All hands abandon ship, Chen ordered. Launch all escape pods. Chief, get everyone out. Captain, the pods can't get clear in time. Webb's voice came from engineering.
Then get as far as you can. Move.
Chen heard the clang of escape pods launching, carrying most of her crew to safety. But she stayed at the helm, personally piloting the Harbinger on its final run. The Sovereign Silence grew larger in the view screen, its damaged hull visible in detail now. She could see the scars where their weapons had struck home, the venting atmosphere, the failing lights. For everyone who died today, Chen whispered. For my parents. For Earth. For the Alliance. The Harbinger crashed into the Sovereign Silence at full speed just as the enemy reactor reached critical mass. The collision disrupted the detonation sequence, turning what would have been a controlled explosion into a catastrophic cascade failure. The Sovereign Silence tore itself apart from within, unable to contain the forces it had been preparing to weaponize. The explosion was visible from the edge of the system, a brief new star born and dying in the darkness between worlds. The escape pod tumbled through space, its emergency beacon screaming into the void. Inside, Captain Sarah Chen fought to stay conscious as blood ran from a gash on her forehead. The pod had been designed for 3 people. 14 crew members were crammed inside, some injured, all terrified. Did we get it? Someone asked. Chen couldn't see who through the press of bodies. Did we kill it? Through the small viewport, Chen could see the debris field where the Sovereign Silence had been. Glowing fragments tumbled through space, their light slowly fading. The mighty warship that had destroyed fleets was now scattered across thousands of kilometers of empty space. Yeah, Chen said, her voice hoarse. We got it. A ragged cheer went up in the pod. People were crying, laughing, holding each other. They had survived. Against all odds, humanity's first venture into galactic warfare had ended in victory. But Chen couldn't celebrate. She was counting the pods around them, bright points of light against the darkness where her crew had ejected. 15 pods, 83 crew members. The math was cruel. War Matron Kessix's flagship appeared nearby, its bulk blocking out the stars. Recovery shuttles launched from its bays, moving efficiently between the escape pods to collect survivors. A Breakor shuttle matched velocity with Chen's pod, and she felt the clunk of docking clamps engaging. The hatch opened, revealing a Breakor recovery team in full environmental suits. They efficiently triaged the humans, separating the wounded from the merely exhausted. Chen waved off the medic who approached her, pointing instead to a young ensign who had taken shrapnel to his leg. Captain Chen, one of the Breakor said through a translator, his voice filled with something that might have been respect or awe. The War Matron requests your presence on the bridge as soon as you are able. I'm able now, Chen said, pulling herself to her feet despite the protest from her body. Everything hurt, but pain was just information. She was alive. That was what mattered. The walk through Kessix's flagship was surreal. Breaker crew members stopped what they were doing to watch her pass. Their multiple arms signing gestures she didn't understand, but which the translator suggested were marks of respect. One warrior, his carapace scarred from a dozen battles, simply nodded to her as she passed. Chen nodded back, understanding passing between soldiers who had both faced death. The bridge was chaos barely contained. Damage reports flooded in from across the fleet. The Sovereign Silence was destroyed, but the price had been catastrophic. 7 Alliance ships lost completely, 4 more damaged beyond field repair, over 9,000 Alliance warriors dead or missing, and the Harbinger, humanity's contribution to the battle, was nothing but expanding debris. Kessix stood at the center of the bridge, coordinating rescue operations and fleet reorganization. When she saw Chen, she stopped and crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides. For a moment, Chen thought the towering alien was going to strike her. Instead, Kessix placed one of her hands on Chen's shoulder in what the translator identified as a gesture of deepest respect. You won the battle, the War Matron said simply. Your tactic, your sacrifice. Without you, we would all be dead. Without your fleet, I wouldn't have had a target to shoot at, Chen replied. This was a team effort. Do not diminish what you did, Kessix said firmly. The Sovereign Silence was supposed to be invincible. It had defeated every force we sent against it. You found its weakness in minutes and exploited it without hesitation. Then you gave your ship to ensure it couldn't escape or take us with it. She paused, her alien features showing something that might have been grief. I have lost many warriors in this war, but I have never seen one crew accomplish so much with so little. Chen felt the weight of those words. So little. Yes, they had been outmatched in every way. Inferior technology, no experience in space combat, facing an enemy that should have killed them in seconds. They had won anyway, through chaos and creativity and a willingness to die if that's what it took. How many of my crew made it? Chen asked quietly. 67 are confirmed alive, Kessix reported. 16 are dead or missing. Recovery operations continue. 16 dead. 16 people who had volunteered to fight humanity's first space battle, who had trusted Chen to lead them, who would never see Earth again. She had known there would be casualties. You didn't go into combat expecting everyone to come home, but knowing it intellectually and feeling it were different things. I need to contact Earth, Chen said. They need to know what happened. Communications with your homeworld are already established, Kessix said. Your General Zhao has been watching the battle through our sensor feeds. He wishes to speak with you. The screen changed, showing Zhao's face. He looked older than he had during their first meeting weeks ago. The weight of command, Chen thought, understanding it more now than she ever had. Captain Chen, Zhao said, his voice formal. On behalf of humanity, I thank you for your service and mourn your losses. The Harbinger's sacrifice will not be forgotten. Sir, the Harbinger is gone, but the mission isn't over, Chen replied. The Sovereign Silence was just one ship. The Cathara Dominion is still out there. They'll send more. I know, Zhao said heavily, which is why I'm promoting you to Admiral and giving you command of Earth's contribution to the continuing war effort. We're building 12 new destroyers based on what we learned from the Harbinger. They'll be ready in 6 months. Chen blinked, trying to process that. Sir, I just lost my ship. I should be facing an inquiry, not a promotion. You accomplished the mission objective with minimal resources against overwhelming odds, Zhao replied. That's exactly the kind of leadership we need. Besides, you understand something that the rest of us are only beginning to grasp. This isn't about technology or firepower. It's about mindset. The Cathara think they're superior. The Alliance thought they were the toughest warriors in the galaxy. You proved that the most dangerous weapon isn't strength or technology. It's adaptability backed by the willingness to do whatever it takes. He leaned forward slightly. The galaxy is watching, Admiral. They saw what one human ship did to a supposedly invincible enemy. They're going to want to know what 12 ships can do. Show them. The transmission ended. Chen stood there trying to process everything. Admiral, 12 ships, 6 months to prepare for an enemy that would be coming back with a vengeance. Your species has a saying, Keswick said, breaking into her thoughts. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. The Cathara didn't kill us today. I suspect they're going to regret that. Over the next hours, the full scope of the battle became clear. The Sovereign Silence had been destroyed, but it had transmitted data back to the Cathara Dominion before dying. The enemy now knew that humanity existed, that they were allied with the Deathworld Alliance, and that they had developed tactics to counter the Cathara's adaptive technology. They would be coming. Not in 3 months, but eventually, and they would be prepared for chaos. We need to be more than chaotic, Chen said to the assembled Alliance commanders in the debriefing that followed. We need to be unpredictable in ways they can't prepare for. Commander Shale, that Breaks, who had lost 2 of his crystalline warships in the battle, spoke up. Explain. How does one prepare to be unpredictable? By embracing randomness as a tactical doctrine, Chen replied. She activated a holographic display showing the battle. The Sovereign Silence's AI was built on the assumption that warfare is about optimization. Find the best tactic and execute it perfectly. But what if warfare isn't about being perfect? What if it's about being effective through imperfection? She zoomed in on the moment when the Harbinger had been firing its deliberately random shots. That AI wasted 95% of its processing power trying to find a pattern that didn't exist. It assumed we were being optimal and just failing to achieve it. It never occurred to its programming that we might be deliberately suboptimal. Nest Mother Sisirax, her scales still stained with the toxic residue from damaged bioweapon containers, hissed thoughtfully. You're suggesting we fight badly on purpose? I'm suggesting we fight unpredictably on purpose, Chen corrected. There's a difference. Random doesn't mean stupid. It means refusing to follow patterns that can be analyzed and countered. If the Cathara can't predict what we're going to do, they can't prepare optimal responses. Keswick studied the display. This goes against everything we've learned about warfare. Coordination wins battles. Discipline wins wars. That's true when you're fighting an enemy that thinks like you do, Chen agreed. But the Cathara don't think like us. They think like machines. Perfect, optimal machines, so we beat them by being imperfect, suboptimal, and impossible to categorize. She pulled up tactical data from Earth's military history. Humans have fought thousands of wars against each other. We've learned every kind of warfare: conventional, guerrilla, naval, aerial, cyber, psychological. We've won battles we should have lost and lost battles we should have won, not because we're better or worse than our enemies, but because warfare isn't a math equation. It's chaos with guns. The commanders discussed this among themselves in their various languages. Finally, Shale that Breaks spoke for them all. You want to teach us to fight like humans? I want to teach you to fight like Deathworlders, Chen said. Real Deathworlders, not warriors who survived harsh planets, but survivors who learned to thrive in hostile conditions by being more adaptable than the things trying to kill them. Over the following days, as the fleet limped toward the nearest Alliance repair facility, Chen worked with the commanders to develop new tactical doctrines. The Break Corps learned to deliberately expose their flanks at random intervals, confusing enemy targeting protocols. The Shards practiced asymmetric formations that made no geometric sense. The Siskari developed bioweapons that behaved erratically, changing targets mid-flight without apparent reason. It felt wrong to them. Everything in their military tradition emphasized discipline, coordination, and the execution of perfect tactics. But Chen pushed them to embrace imperfection. Your old tactics lost to the sovereign silence, she reminded them when they resisted. 7 fleets destroyed, thousands dead. If you want different results, you need different methods. The Alliance warriors were proud, but they weren't stupid. They could see the logic even if it violated their instincts. And more importantly, they could see the results from the battle. One human ship using tactics that made no sense had accomplished what their fleets could not. Meanwhile, back on Earth, humanity mobilized for war. The 12 new destroyers weren't just copies of the Harbinger. Engineers had studied the battle footage, analyzed what had worked and what hadn't, and incorporated improvements. The new ships would be faster, more maneuverable, and armed with a variety of weapon systems designed to be used randomly rather than optimally. More importantly, Earth's military academies began teaching a new course, applied chaos theory in space combat. Officers learned to make decisions based on dice rolls. Tactics were taught as suggestions rather than doctrine. Simulations rewarded creative failure over predictable success. The galaxy's military experts would have been horrified. It violated every principle of warfare they knew. But Chen understood something they didn't. The Cathara weren't just another enemy. They were an enemy that learned, adapted, and optimized. Fighting them with conventional tactics was like teaching them how to beat you. The only winning move was to be unteachable. 6 weeks after the battle, Chen stood in her new office aboard the Alliance repair station. Through the viewport, she could see her surviving crew members working alongside Alliance engineers, sharing knowledge, learning from each other. Humans taught the aliens about improvisation and adaptive thinking. The aliens taught humans about technologies that seemed like magic. A notification appeared on her console, a message from Earth. The first of the new destroyers had completed its shakedown cruise and was ready for deployment. 11 more would follow over the next 5 months. Chen opened a bottle of Earth whiskey that General Zhao had sent her and poured a small amount into a cup. She raised it toward the viewport, toward the stars where 16 of her crew were now scattered as atoms in the void. To the Harbinger, she said quietly, and to everyone who didn't make it home, we'll make it count. She drank, feeling the burn, and then returned to her work. There were tactical plans to refine, crews to train, and an enemy that would eventually come looking for revenge. The Deathworld Alliance had won a battle, but the war was just beginning, and when the Cathara returned, they would find something they hadn't anticipated. An alliance that had learned to be dangerous not despite their differences, but because of them. Chen smiled grimly as she reviewed the fleet composition reports. 12 human destroyers, 40 Alliance warships being retrofitted with new tactical systems, and thousands of warriors who had learned that sometimes the best plan was to have no plan at all. The Cathara wanted to conquer the galaxy. They were about to learn why Deathworlders were called Deathworlders, not because they were tough, but because they were survivors. And survivors didn't win by being stronger. They won by being too stubborn, too creative, and too unpredictable to kill. The galaxy was about to change. Chen intended to be at the front of that change, leading humanity's contribution to a war that would determine whether freedom or tyranny ruled the stars. She had lost her ship, lost crew members who trusted her, but she had gained something too. Proof that humanity belonged among the stars, not as conquerors or supplicants, but as partners with something valuable to contribute. The sovereign silence was dead, but its destruction had sent a message across the galaxy. The Deathworld Alliance had found humanity, and humanity had answered the call to battle. 6 months had transformed the Deathworld Alliance in ways that centuries of warfare had not. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of the newly commissioned UETF Relentless, watching as the combined fleet conducted training exercises in the asteroid field that had once been a battlefield. The fleet barely resembled the force that had fought the sovereign silence. Earth's 12 new destroyers moved in formations that looked chaotic to the untrained eye, but were actually carefully randomized patterns. Alliance warships had been retrofitted with human-designed combat computers that deliberately introduced variables into their tactical systems. Breaker dreadnoughts practiced sudden, unpredictable maneuvers. Shard vessels broke their traditional geometric formations to scatter and reform without coordination. Scary bioships deployed weapons in sequences that even their own commanders couldn't predict until the moment of launch. War Matron Kessex approached from behind, her footsteps deliberately heavy to announce her presence. Chen had learned that the Breakor considered it rude to surprise someone who had earned respect through combat. "The fleet looks ready," Kessex observed, joining Chen at the viewport. "Your training protocols have been uncomfortable for my commanders, but effective." "Change is always uncomfortable," Chen replied. "How are they handling the psychological adjustments?" "Better than expected. Commander Shale that Break says his people find the randomness disturbing but logical. The Siskari have adapted well. Their hunting instincts translate to unpredictable tactics more naturally than I anticipated." "The Breakor?" Kessex made a gesture that Chen had learned meant rueful amusement. "We struggle. We were raised on discipline and order. Chaos is our enemy." "Not chaos," Chen corrected gently. "Controlled randomness. There's a difference. Chaos is what happens when systems fail. What we're doing is building a system that incorporates unpredictability as a feature, rather than a bug." Below them, a human destroyer executed a maneuver that looked like a navigational error, drifting off course before suddenly accelerating at a 90-degree angle and firing on a target drone. The shot looked poorly aimed but connected, destroying the drone. Traditional tactics would have called for a straight approach and optimal firing solution. The human way saved 3 seconds by appearing incompetent. 3 seconds didn't sound like much. But in space combat, 3 seconds could mean the difference between a shield reconfiguration completing or a weapon getting through. "Speaking of features," Kessex said, "I need to show you something." She activated a holographic display, bringing up a star map. "Our scouts have detected Cathera activity in the outer reaches. Not just one ship this time, a fleet. 15 vessels, including 3 that match the Sovereign Silence's configuration." Chen felt her stomach tighten. 1 Sovereign Silence-class ship had nearly destroyed them. 3 would be catastrophic. How long until they reach Alliance space? 4 months. Maybe 3 if they push their engines. They're being more cautious now, sending scouts ahead, probing our defenses. They learned from what happened to the Sovereign Silence. "Good," Chen said, surprising Kessex. "If they'd just charged in blindly, they wouldn't be worried. The fact that they're worried means we hurt them badly enough to make them think, you sound pleased, that we face a more dangerous enemy." "I'm pleased that we face a thinking enemy instead of an arrogant one," Chen clarified. "Arrogance made the Sovereign Silence come alone. Caution will make this fleet more careful, and careful enemies make predictable mistakes trying to avoid unpredictable threats." Kessex's expression showed what Chen recognized as respect mixed with concern. "You think several moves ahead, Admiral? It's unsettling. It's necessary. The Cathara adapt to what we show them, so we need to show them something that makes them prepare for the wrong thing. You have a plan? I have the beginning of one. Let me talk to my strategists and I'll brief the Command Council tomorrow." That evening, Chen gathered her senior officers in the Relentless's conference room. Commander Park, now captain of his own destroyer, Chief Engineer Webb, who had survived the Harbinger's destruction and now supervised engineering for the entire human contingent. Colonel Martinez, who had come aboard as liaison to Alliance ground forces. And 2 new faces, Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, a game theorist from Earth who specialized in adversarial AI systems, and Captain Zhang Wei, who commanded the destroyer Audacity, and had a reputation for creative insubordination that was perfect for their new doctrine. "The Cathara are coming back," Chen said without preamble, displaying the scout reports. 15 ships. "We can assume they're prepared for chaotic tactics. They've had 6 months to analyze what happened to the Sovereign Silence and develop counters." "Then our advantage is gone," Park said grimly. "No," Dr. Okonkwo interjected, her eyes bright with excitement. "They think our advantage is chaos, so they'll prepare for chaos. But chaos was just a tactic. Our real advantage is adaptability," Chen nodded. "Exactly. We used chaos against the Sovereign Silence because it was the counter to their optimization. But if the Cathera are now prepared for chaos, then chaos becomes predictable. We need to evolve. To what?" Zhang asked. "If we can't be chaotic and we can't be organized, what's left?" "We can be both," Webb said thoughtfully. "Or neither. Or we can be whichever one they're not expecting at any given moment." Martinez leaned forward. "You're talking about meta-unpredictability. Not just being random, but randomizing when we're random and when we're organized. It will drive the Cathara AI systems insane," Okonkwo said with satisfaction. They'll try to find the pattern in when we use patterns. They'll burn processing power analyzing our meta-analysis. Meanwhile, we just flip a coin to decide whether to coordinate or not. Park frowned. That sounds like it would drive us insane too. How do we coordinate if we don't know whether we're supposed to be coordinating? We don't coordinate, Chen said. We improvise. Think of it like jazz music. The musicians don't plan every note, but they listen to each other and respond. Sometimes they harmonize. Sometimes they deliberately clash. But it's always music, even if it's not predictable music. She pulled up a tactical simulation. Here's how I see it working. Each ship's commander makes independent decisions based on their judgment of the situation. No overall coordination. No orders from me telling you what to do. You see an opportunity, you take it. You see a threat, you respond however you think is best. That could lead to friendly fire incidents, Martinez pointed out. Or ships getting in each other's way. Probably, Chen agreed. But those mistakes will be different every time. The Cathara can't predict our errors if we don't know what errors we're going to make. And we'll make fewer errors over time as we get better at improvising together. Zhang grinned. You're essentially telling us to do whatever we want in combat. I'm telling you to use your judgment as trained officers to respond to dynamic situations without waiting for orders that might not come. Chen corrected. There's a difference between doing whatever you want and doing what you think is right in the moment. Over the next weeks, they trained in this new doctrine. It was harder than the chaos tactics had been, because it required each commander to think independently, while remaining aware of what their allies were doing. Ships practiced responding to each other without coordinating. Captains learned to anticipate opportunities created by other ships' actions, without being told what those actions would be. The Alliance commanders found it even more difficult. Their entire military tradition was built on hierarchy and clear chains of command. The idea of junior officers making strategic decisions without approval was almost heretical, but they were warriors, and warriors adapted or died. Commander Shale that Breaks proved unexpectedly good at improvisational tactics. His crystalline thought processes, once freed from rigid doctrine, found creative solutions that organic minds might not have considered. Nest Mother Sasirax turned her bioships into unpredictable nightmares, deploying weapons that even she wasn't sure would work until they were used. Kessex struggled the most. As War Matron, she was accustomed to command, to making decisions that thousands followed. Surrendering that control went against every instinct, but she was also practical enough to recognize that her instincts had been failing against the Cathara. One day, after a particularly frustrating training exercise where her dreadnought had collided with a shard vessel, because both commanders made simultaneous decisions without coordination, Kessex found Chen in the observation deck. Your way of war is insane, Kessex said bluntly. How did humanity survive if this is how you fight? Chen smiled. By being more insane than whatever was trying to kill us. War Matron, you're thinking about this wrong. You're trying to control the improvisation, to make it organized. That's not how it works. You have to trust your people to make good decisions without you. And if they make bad decisions, then they learn from them, and maybe they die. But the alternative is making predictable decisions that get everyone killed. Chen gestured at the star map showing the approaching Cathara fleet. Those ships out there are run by AIs that are smarter than us, faster than us, and more powerful than us. The only advantage we have is that we're alive. We're messy. We're emotional. We make mistakes. And sometimes those mistakes create opportunities that perfect tactics never would. Kessex was silent for a long moment. Then she said, On my homeworld there's a predator called a swarm that thinks. It's actually millions of small creatures that act as one organism. Perfect coordination, perfect efficiency. They can strip or renders the stone to bones in minutes. Sounds terrifying. They are. But they have a weakness. Disrupt the coordination even briefly and they become confused. They attack each other, unable to distinguish friend from enemy without the group consensus. Kessex turned to look at Chen. I think I understand now. The Cathara are like the swarm that thinks. Perfect coordination through their AI systems, and you want us to be the disruption. Not just disruption. We want to be the thing that makes their perfection a weakness instead of a strength. The Cathara fleet arrived 3 months and 2 weeks later, dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Chronos Belt, the same location where the Sovereign Silence had died. Perhaps it was meant as intimidation. Perhaps it was calculated to use familiar terrain. Either way, it told Chen what she needed to know. The Kethera thought of this as unfinished business. The Alliance fleet met them there, 62 ships strong compared to the enemy's 15. But numbers meant little against opponents this advanced. The Kethera vessels were larger, each one bristling with weapons that could tear through standard Alliance shields like paper. Chen sat in the command chair of the Relentless, watching the tactical display as both fleets took position. No communication had been sent, no demands for surrender. The Kethera had apparently decided that talking was unnecessary. Fine by her. All ships, Chen transmitted on the fleet-wide channel. No orders, no coordination, just fight. Show them what we've learned. She cut the transmission and turned to her own tactical officer. Lieutenant, what do you think we should do? The lieutenant looked startled to be asked. Then his training kicked in. The leftmost Kethera ship is in a position where if we hit it, debris might damage the ship behind it. Recommend kinetic barrage, ma'am. Good thinking. Make it happen. Around them the fleet moved, but not in coordinated waves like before. Each ship operated independently, captains making their own decisions. Some attacked immediately, some held back. Some grouped into impromptu partnerships. Some went alone. It looked like chaos, but it was something more dangerous than chaos. It was 62 independent intelligences all working toward the same goal without any predictable pattern. The Kethera fleet responded with perfect coordination, their shields reconfiguring to optimal frequencies, their weapons targeting the most threatening ships with calculated precision. They had learned from the sovereign silence. They were ready for chaos. Except this wasn't quite chaos. A human destroyer charged straight at a Kethera battleship, its weapons blazing in what looked like a suicidal run. The enemy ship's AI calculated the threat level, determined that the destroyer would be destroyed long before it could cause damage, and allocated minimal defensive resources to it. Then a shard vessel appeared from behind an asteroid and fired on the same battleship's flank. The Kethera ship's shields were already configured for the human ship's weapons. Wrong frequency for the shard's crystalline beams. Damage got through, but there had been no coordination between the two ships. The human captain had simply made a decision to attack. The shard commander had seen an opportunity and taken it. No plan, no orders, just two warriors responding to the moment. Across the battlefield, similar moments played out. Ships that looked like they were retreating suddenly weren't. Attacks that seemed to be missing created opportunities for other ships. Formations that appeared to be forming dissolved before completing. The Kethera AIs tried to predict. They analyzed trajectories and firing patterns. They calculated optimal responses, but there was nothing to optimize against. Each Alliance ship was essentially fighting its own, independent battle that sometimes overlapped with others in useful ways and sometimes didn't. Enemy fleet is splitting their targeting protocols, the Relentless's tactical officer reported. They're trying to predict each ship individually instead of treating us as a unified force. How's that working for them? Chen asked. Their response time is slowing. Processing power divided between 15 different tactical situations. Chen smiled. Good. Helm, take us into the middle of their formation. Weapons. Fire at anything that looks important. The Relentless dove into the Kethera fleet, and Chen felt the exhilaration of pure improvisation. No battle plan to follow. No orders to execute. Just her judgment, her training, and her crew's ability to respond to whatever happened next. A Kethera beam weapon grazed their shields. The shield frequency was wrong. They were configured for energy weapons, but this beam phased. Emergency alerts blared. Before Chen could give an order, Chief Webb rerouted power and shifted the shield harmonics. The next beam scattered harmlessly. Nice work, Chief, Chen called down to engineering. Just doing my job, Admiral, which is apparently making it up as I go along. Kessix's dreadnought smashed through a Kethera ship's shields using pure momentum, its armored prow designed to survive ramming. But instead of completing the ram, Kessix ordered her ship to roll at the last second, exposing her broadside weapons at point-blank range. The Kethera ship's AI had been calculating for a kinetic impact. It wasn't prepared for 28 heavy plasma cannons at zero range. The enemy ship broke apart, its reactor going critical. The explosion caught two other Kethera vessels, damaging their shields just as a squadron of Sakari bioships released their weapons. Viruses that had been engineered to work slowly, began consuming the damaged hulls at exponentially faster rates when they encountered exposed systems. Enemy fleet is adapting, Tactical reported. They're trying to regroup. All ships, Chen transmitted. They're trying to get organized. Be more chaotic. It was a deliberately contradictory order. Be more chaotic. Some commanders took it literally, making their ships spin and fire randomly. Others interpreted it as permission to try crazy tactics they'd been thinking about. A few ignored it entirely and kept doing what they were already doing. The Cathera AIs couldn't find a pattern because there was no pattern. Their perfect coordination became a weakness as each ship's AI tried to share tactical data with the others. But the data kept changing faster than they could process it. They were trying to have a conversation in a language where the grammar rules changed every sentence, Captain. Zhang in the Audacity executed what would later be called the Zhang maneuver. He shut down his ship's main reactor, going dark and drifting as if destroyed. A Cathara battleship, calculating that he was no longer a threat, turned its attention elsewhere. Zhang cold-started his reactor using emergency power, a procedure that every safety manual said would destroy the ship. It didn't, or rather, it worked just long enough for him to fire his entire missile payload into the enemy ship's engine section before his reactor actually did overload Zhang, and his crew evacuated in escape pods seconds before the sea. Audacity tore itself apart. The Cathara battleship, crippled and unable to maneuver, became an easy target for Alliance ships. The battle raged for 3 hours. Ships on both sides died. The Relentless took damage, lost sections to decompression, suffered casualties. But they kept fighting. Not because they had a plan, but because they had a purpose. Finally, the Cathara fleet broke. The remaining ships, 7 out of 15, retreated at maximum speed, abandoning their damaged vessels. They had lost. Not because the Alliance was stronger or had better technology, but because they couldn't adapt fast enough to opponents who refused to be predictable. As the enemy ships disappeared into faster-than-light travel, Chen surveyed the cost. 18 Alliance ships destroyed, thousands of warriors dead. The Relentless was damaged but functional. Kessix's flagship had lost 2 of its 6 engine sections. Commander Shale that Breaks' ship had been completely destroyed, but he and most of his crew had survived. But they had won. Not just survived, won. Driven off an enemy fleet that should have crushed them. All ships begin recovery operations, Chen ordered. Collect survivors, secure the wounded, gather data on what worked and what didn't. Over the next days, as the fleet limped toward the nearest Alliance station, the commanders held their after-action review. It was different from any military debriefing in history. Instead of analyzing what went right and wrong, they were trying to understand something more fundamental: how to deliberately not understand what they were doing while still being effective. It shouldn't work, Commander Shale that Break said, his crystalline form now showing cracks from his ship's destruction. Everything in military science says coordination wins battles, but we won through lack of coordination. We won through distributed decision-making, Dr. Okonkwo corrected. Each commander made good local decisions without needing to understand the global picture. The Cathera tried to understand the global picture and got paralyzed by trying to analyze too many independent actors. Nest Mother Syrax flicked her tongue thoughtfully. On my homeworld we have a saying, the swarm has no mind, yet the swarm survives. Individual insects are stupid, but thousands of stupid decisions sometimes create intelligent results. We were like that. Individually limited but collectively overwhelming. I prefer to think of it as directed chaos, Kessix said. We all knew the objective, destroy the enemy, but we each found our own path to that objective. Like water flowing downhill, it takes different routes, but it all reaches the bottom eventually. Chen listened to the commanders finding their own ways to understand what they had done. It pleased her that they were developing their own philosophies rather than just following human doctrine. That meant they were truly adapting, not just copying. The Cathera will adapt to this too eventually, she cautioned. They'll develop AI systems that can handle multiple independent actors. Or they'll find some other counter we haven't thought of. We can't stop evolving our tactics. Then we teach them a new lesson each time, Kessix said firmly. They adapted to our strength, so we showed them our chaos. They adapted to our chaos, so we showed them our independence. Next time we show them something else entirely. What? Park asked. What's left after strength, chaos, and independence? Chen smiled. Whatever we come up with when we need it. That's the real advantage. The Cathara spend months analyzing and preparing. We spend minutes improvising and adapting. By the time they've perfected a counter to our last trick, we're already doing something new. Word of the battle spread through the Alliance and beyond. The Deathworld Alliance, which had been on the verge of collapse 6 months ago, had now defeated a Cathara fleet twice. Neutral powers began taking notice. Some saw opportunity, others saw threat. But all of them saw that the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted, and at the center of that shift was humanity. A species nobody had heard of a year ago. A species from a planet so hostile it shouldn't have produced sentient life. A species that had looked at the galaxy's greatest threat and responded not with fear, but with creativity. Ambassadors began arriving at Alliance stations, seeking audiences, proposing alliances, offering technologies in exchange for training in the human way of war. The Alliance Council found itself in the unprecedented position of having leverage in galactic politics. But Chen remained cautious. "Success is dangerous," she told Kessex during one of their regular strategy sessions. "It makes you think you've found the answer. There is no answer. There's only the next question. You think the Cathara will return? I know they will. We've embarrassed them twice now. Hurt them badly enough that they can't ignore us. Next time they'll come with everything they have. Then we'll need everything we have," Kessex said. "The Alliance Council is discussing full mobilization. Every Deathworld species is committing their reserve fleets. We'll have 200 ships within a year. And the Cathara will bring 1,000, Chen said quietly. This is their empire we're fighting. They have resources we can't match. The question isn't whether we can defeat them ship to ship. The question is whether we can make victory so costly that they decide we're not worth conquering." She pulled up intelligence reports on the Cathara Dominion. They're an empire built on the idea that they're superior, that their AI systems and technology make them the rightful rulers of the galaxy. We're not just fighting their ships, we're fighting their ideology. Every time we win, we prove that ideology wrong. And that's more dangerous to them than losing ships. Kessex considered this. "You're saying we can't beat them militarily, but we might beat them psychologically." "I'm saying we already are beating them psychologically. The Sovereign Silence was supposed to be invincible. It died. The Cathara fleet was supposed to be unstoppable. It ran. Each victory doesn't just cost them ships, it costs them certainty. And an empire built on certainty can't survive uncertainty." "How very human," Kessex said with what might have been approval, "to turn a military conflict into a philosophical war." "War is philosophy with guns," Chen replied. "You're fighting to prove something. That your way of life deserves to continue, that your values are worth dying for. The Cathara believe in optimization and superiority. We believe in adaptation and survival. Eventually, one of those philosophies will be proven right. I intend to make sure it's ours." 6 months after the second battle, the Deathworld Alliance formally reorganized. The old hierarchy, based on which species were toughest or came from the harshest worlds, was replaced with a new structure. Every member species had equal voice. Decisions were made through debate rather than domination. And humanity, the newest members, were given a seat on the High Council. Not because they were the strongest. They weren't. Not because they had the best technology. They didn't. But because they had demonstrated something the Alliance had lacked. The ability to think differently. To find advantages in apparent weaknesses. To turn limitations into strengths. Admiral Sarah Chen stood before the Council, accepting her appointment as Joint Commander of Unconventional Warfare. It was a new position, created specifically to formalize what she had been doing informally. Her role was to ensure that the Alliance never became predictable, never fell into patterns that could be exploited, never stopped evolving. "We stand at a crossroads," she told the assembled representatives. "Behind us is the Alliance as it was, strong, proud, but ultimately predictable. Ahead of us is the Alliance as it must become, adaptive, creative, and impossible to categorize. The Cathara came to our space expecting to find warriors. They found something they didn't have a word for. They found survivors who had spent their entire evolutionary history learning how to be unkillable." She gestured at the various species around her. The Breakor survived worlds that would crush lesser beings. The shards evolved in pressures that would pulverize most life. The Sakari thrived in toxicity that would kill in seconds. And humans learned to live on a planet that tried to murder them daily for millions of years. We are not warriors. We are something more dangerous. We are survivors who learn to thrive. And that, she continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber, is what the Cathara Dominion doesn't understand. They think this is about military might. It's not. It's about whether the galaxy will be shaped by those who optimize for dominance or those who adapt to survive. They chose optimization. We chose adaptation. And adaptation always wins in the long run, because the environment always changes faster than perfection can keep up. The Council voted unanimously to approve the new organizational structure. The Deathworld Alliance was reborn, not as an association of the toughest species, but as a coalition of survivors who understood that strength came in many forms. As Chen left the council chamber, she found Kessex waiting in the corridor. The War Matron, now High Commander of Coordinated Forces, nodded respectfully. "Your speech was effective," Kessex said. "You've changed the Alliance more in 1 year than it changed in centuries before humanity arrived." "I just helped you see what you already were," Chen replied. "You didn't need to change. You needed to evolve. Is there a difference? Change is replacing what you were. Evolution is becoming more of what you already are." Chen looked out a viewport at the fleet assembling outside the station, human ships and alien vessels all bristling with weapons, all crewed by warriors from worlds that had forged them in fire and fury. "The Cathara think they're facing the Deathworld Alliance," she said quietly. "They don't realize they're facing something the galaxy has never seen before. They're facing an alliance of species who learned that the most dangerous weapon in the universe isn't technology or strength. It's the refusal to accept defeat, backed by the creativity to find new ways to survive no matter how many times the universe tries to kill you." Kessex looked at the fleet, then back at Chen. "When they come again, and they will come, what will we show them?" Chen smiled, and it was the smile of a predator that had been prey long enough to learn all the prey's tricks before becoming the hunter. "Whatever they're not expecting. That's the beauty of adaptation. We don't need to know the answer now. We just need to be ready to find it when the question arrives." "Very human," Kessex observed. "Very Deathworlder," Chen corrected. "You just needed someone from a Class 13 world to remind you what that really means." As they walked through the station together, two warriors from worlds that should have been enemies but had become allies, Chen reflected on how far they had all come. A year ago, the Alliance had been losing a war. Now they were redefining what it meant to fight. The Cathara Dominion was still out there, still powerful, still determined to conquer. But they would return to find an enemy that was no longer the same. An enemy that had learned that survival wasn't about being unbeatable, it was about being unkillable. And there was a difference. You could beat a warrior, you could beat an army, you could even beat a fleet, but you couldn't beat someone who simply refused to die, who learned from every defeat, who turned every weakness into a different kind of strength, and who never, ever stopped adapting. The Cathara wanted to test themselves against the galaxy's apex predators. They had found them. Not one species, but an alliance of survivors who had each been forged in their own crucibles and emerged as something the universe hadn't been ready for. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity had known for millions of years, that Deathworlds didn't create warriors. They created survivors. And survivors were far more dangerous because warriors fought to win. Survivors fought to make sure nobody else ever had to face the horrors they had endured. And that was a fight that couldn't be won with superior technology or perfect tactics. That was a fight of philosophy, of will, of the fundamental question of what life was for. The Cathara chose domination. The Alliance chose survival. And when those two philosophies met, only one would prove strong enough to shape the galaxy's future. Admiral Sarah Chen, looking out at the stars that held both allies and enemies, knew which side she was betting on. Not because humanity was superior, but because humanity, and all the Deathworld species, had spent their entire existence proving that survival always found a way. The call to battle had been answered. Now it was time to show the galaxy what answering that call really meant.